Okay, Tuesday, the 30th of May, 2023. And it dawned on me about a week ago, maybe less, that there's one more video we need to make about the Trinity before I go into the two powers in heaven. Believe it or not, there's going to be several new pieces of material. So I won't just be repeating myself as often as I did previously. And it's going to tie everything together very nicely and show very emphatically why God cannot consist of multiple persons. So we have to start with the irony and anomaly of the Christian church referring to God with the singular masculine pronoun he. In using a singular pronoun, that doesn't work because he's three in person, according to the teaching. But he cannot be a he either, because the divine essence is impersonal, not personal. So in other words, if you want to make the claim that, well, we call him he because God is personal, yeah, but personal in the sense of three persons, not one person. So how does he make sense? And in the same way, using the word he doesn't make sense if we're talking about the divine essence, because the divine essence is impersonal, not personal. So whether you're trying to emphasize the fact that God is one or the fact that God is personal, either way it doesn't work, because the singular he cannot capture the fact that God is three, nor can the word he be used to describe the oneness of the essence, because the essence is impersonal. Now, if you say, well, the oneness of God is personal because the essence is enhypostatized by the persons, it still doesn't work. It still doesn't work. I'm having to refer to notes here because I'm doing this kind of on the fly here, but let me get into this because I'm hitting a brick wall here. Yeah, it still doesn't work to call God he, because the Christian isn't claiming that God is a person, but three persons. So the best you could do is to simply argue that God is personal by virtue of the enhypostatization of the divine essence by the three persons. But really, all you're saying at that point, you're not saying anything about the number of persons that are in God. You're not saying that anything about whether God is a person or two persons or three persons or whatever. Right? You're describing not a noun, not a thing, but rather you're using a descriptive word. When you say personal, you're really just describing a being that possesses or exhibits personal or personality traits, characteristics, qualities, attributes that are personal. That's why we can refer to our pets, for example, as having personalities or exhibiting personality traits and being personal in that sense. Not because the cat or the dog is literally a person per se. So it makes no sense. In other words, so basically you have two options, right? The only way you can refer to God using a he or she pronoun is to recognize God as a single divine person, a person. If you can't do that, then at best he can only be personal, which rules out consisting of more than one person, because you're simply describing attributes, traits, characteristics at that point. God can only be either a person or simply have personal traits without being a person. Okay, so that's point number one. The second point is this. I have come across Christians, Orthodox ones, Eastern ones, predictably. And in fact, I debated with a guy not that long ago who made this argument. He said that, well, God is both a person and three persons. He is a person, the person of the Father, since the Father, begat the Son and spirated the Spirit from all eternity. Since the Father is the cause, eternal cause of the Holy Trinity, then therefore God is both a person, i.e. the Father, as well as three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That is what we call a contradiction. I've never begrudged, even though I don't agree with them, I have never begrudged Christians the right to make the argument that God is one in essence and three in person. That he is one in one particular sense and three in another sense altogether. Because that's not contradictory. It may ultimately be the wrong position, but the premise is not contradictory. But to say that he is one in person and three in person is a contradiction. Because you're saying he's one in one sense and simultaneously three in this very same sense. Okay, so that's point number two. Point number three, this is the good part. Let me just read my notes here on this point. If there are three distinct persons, then there must be some common quality or state, i.e., personhood, that they share, which makes them all persons in spite of their uniquely distinct hypostatic properties or personal properties. Let's just go over that one more time, what those are for anybody who may not have heard the previous videos. Hypostatic properties in Trinitarian theology are those things that distinguish each of the persons one from another, so that we recognize them each as being different persons, and the properties also distinguish each of the persons from the divine essence per se, right? So the Father is said to have the hypostatic property of being uncaused. The Son has the hypostatic property of being begotten, and the Spirit has the hypostatic property of being spirated. So, if you're going to posit that there is more than one person in God, then there has to be something related to personhood, which that's the best word we can use, which would be personhood, that they all participate in or partake of, if they are all going to be persons, even though their hypostatic properties are creating a very clear difference between each of the three persons. If they're all three going to be persons, that means they partake of the same thing, which we would have to call, like I just said, personhood. But that poses a huge problem for the church, because the church claims that anything that three persons have in common belongs to the nature or essence. So now what they've just done, without realizing it, is they've reduced personhood to essence, simply by positing that there's more than one person in the Trinity, or in the Godhead. So, they've reduced persons to the essence. So what does that do to the hypostatic properties? The hypostatic properties then have nothing to do with the persons per se. The properties ultimately would have to become energies. So the property of being uncaused would be an energy of God, which we call or name the Father. And then being begotten is a property that refers to the energy of begetting, which is given the personal name, the Son. Okay, you see where I'm going with this? These are just energies that are being named. They're being assigned personal names. And this is what creates a lot of confusion for people who aren't capable of going deep enough metaphysically to understand that they are being assaulted with this deceptive teaching that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever when it's all said and done with. Once you see what's going on, like we've just done here, you can start to piece together this sort of psychological operation that's being conducted upon your mind. It's like you're being assaulted, and it's a very sophisticated assault. And I'm not saying that it's deliberate. As complicated as the doctrine of the Trinity is, I don't think that anyone could be lucid enough to understand what they were doing in order to do it deliberately. You see what I'm saying? I think this is just something that got a bunch of theologians, they twisted themselves up in knots epistemologically and metaphysically. They imposed this as dogma on the church, and now billions of people are parroting something that makes absolutely no sense on any level whatsoever. So, yeah, that was the bottom line. Was I had to take you from one step to the next so that it would make sense by the end of it, why it is that the person's ultimately reduced to the essence and why the hypostatic properties ultimately reduced to energies. Which is just, again, another way of saying, like I said in a few videos back, that the Orthodox approach to the Trinity is simply a more sophisticated variant on the doctrine of absolute divine simplicity. Okay, guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Actually, I don't get a whole lot of hits on Sunday, so I think it would be better to submit this on Monday morning. So I will wait till Monday morning.